Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of our Guitar Genius Chat. I'm Mike Philippov, of course. And today we're going to be talking about memorizing the fretboard on guitar and doing it in a way that's going to be much faster, much easier, and way less overwhelming than most people find it. And obviously, there are many, many benefits to memorizing the fretboard, which it just makes everything you do on guitar so much easier, from improvising guitar solos, composing solos, writing your own songs, and even, believe it or not, learning songs and solos by other people if that's one of your goals. Because the better you can visualize where things are on the fretboard, the easier and faster it is to memorize long passages and retain them in your memory. So there's a lot of benefits to be had there. And to help me talk about this topic, I brought on a very special guest, a very longtime friend of mine and a teacher of mine from whom I've learned a lot about guitar and specifically this topic of memorizing the fretboard. I'm, of course, talking about the guitar breakthrough specialist, Tom Hess. Hello, Tom Hess. Good to have you.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me, buddy.
All right. So to begin, I'd like to ask you, Tom Hess, if somebody is new to the topic of memorizing the fretboard and they're looking at the guitar and it's really overwhelming because there's 6 strings and all the frets and everything, what are the first 1, 2, or 3 things you would recommend somebody to do to begin memorizing the fretboard?
Great question. So the first thing that I would think about is, for most people, they kind of can figure out where some things are. Maybe they can figure out where the A notes are, or they can figure out, where some of the notes are, but that takes time. Now, if I said to you, hey, find the E note on the E string, most people could go right to it, right? It's open E or the 12th fret. It's pretty easy to recall that information. But if I said, where is the B flat note on the G string? How much time did that take you to know that it's the 3rd fret? So the point is that you've learned all the notes at one time or another. I mean, you learned them and then you forgot them, right? So you might play something and okay, that's B flat right there. And you remember it for a little while. And then tomorrow you forget that that's B flat. And then you come across that note in the future and you have to recall it or figure it out, but then we might forget it. Well, all this constant forgetting about where things are. Where's the F note on the A string? Well, it's on the 8th fret, but how long did it take you to recall that? So if I said, where's the E on the E string? You have instant recall. Most people by now have instant recall. They know exactly where it is. They don't have to think about it. They don't have to figure it out. They don't have to calculate anything or count. They just know it immediately. That's how we want to know everything on the guitar. So instead of trying to learn all the notes one at a time, all the A notes and then all the G notes and all the C sharp notes, let's just choose one, doesn't matter which one, and let's be done. That means if you chose all the F notes on the guitar, if that was the note, let's learn all the F notes to the point that we never, ever, for the rest of our lives, ever have to hesitate or calculate or figure it out. We have instant recall on that one note. Even if we don't know where the other notes are, even if we have to take a lot of time to recall them, if there's an F note that needs to be found, we're all over it. Instant, immediate recall. Okay, so once you do it for one note, now you go to a next note. Maybe it's G, maybe it's B flat, doesn't matter what it is. You choose another one and immediately and forever memorize and be able to recall it, so that we don't waste time relearning and refiguring out and counting where things are. You do it once and you never have to do it the rest of your life ever again, because you know it like you know your name. There's no thinking about it. What most people do is not that. They pick a note, they learn the A notes on the guitar, then they have to find where the D notes are, and they learn that. And by the time they go through all the notes, they've forgotten where the A notes are, or they've forgotten where the E flat notes are. So there's this constant starting over. So I think it's better to pick one note, one letter name, learn where they are all over the guitar, immediate recall where you never forget. I think that's better, even if you don't know the other notes, than it is to kind of be able to figure out where the other notes are, but it takes time to do that each time. So advice number one, pick one note on the guitar. Okay. Then before you move on to note number two, get really good at what's the note above the note. Let's say the note I chose was B. Okay. Let's say I memorized where all the B notes were on the guitar. I've got immediate recall. I might not know the other ones, but I know where the B notes are. What's the note right above B? What's the note right below B? Let's memorize that. So we got B flat, and then we have C right here. Okay. Now let's memorize those three. So if we got these three notes, congratulations, you've just mastered 25% of the entire guitar neck. You got a quarter of it. There's only 12 frets. You've now got three under immediate recall anywhere on the guitar. Okay, here's B, there's C, there's B flat. You've got 25% of it down. Now you choose another note. Could be D, let's say. You got the note above, you got the note below. Okay, you learn that everywhere. Now you've got half the guitar completely locked down and memorized. So that's the first couple pieces of advice here. Now, the third one, and maybe we'll get to this later on here, is if you know the letter names of the notes, that only gives you a little bit of information. So if you know where the G notes are on the guitar, okay, that's nice to know. It's useful to know. But what are you going to do with that information? Nothing. You're not going to do anything with that information because it's not enough information. Okay. What are you going to do with the G notes? Okay. If you got a G note right there, how are you going to know when you're supposed to play a G note unless you're reading, let's say, music notation? But how do you know that you want a G note in that particular moment? What's really important is to understand how the G note functions. So if we're in the key of G, let's say, knowing the root of a major key any major key is way more important, way more useful than knowing where the G note is specifically. So if we're in the key of C, okay, key of C, knowing where the root note is everywhere, all over the guitar for that key is way more useful than knowing where the G notes are. Now, here's the best part. Once you learn where the root notes are, it's the same for all other major keys. So if we change keys from C to A, we take our scale, started on A. The root notes are exactly in the same spot in that key. For that scale finger, they don't move. If we go to the key of E, there they are. So we've got the root notes for every major key, not just one. If you only memorize where the G note was, that's not going to help you in the key of E. I mean, it's not going to help you directly, okay? So once we know where the root notes are in a particular key, those notes move as we change keys. So you can use it now in every major key, anywhere on the guitar. Once you learn where the root notes are, you might then pick a different note, maybe the fifth of the key. So you got one there. You got one there. You got one there. You got another one there. That is infinitely more useful and valuable than knowing the letter names of the guitar. Now, whenever I say this, I get a lot of people pushing back saying, well, the letter names, they're really important. Not saying they're not important. I'm just saying that knowing where the root is, or the third or the fifth of any major scale or any fingering on the guitar in any key is way more valuable. So if you have limited time to practice, you might focus on where those notes are, where the roots are or the fifths are, instead of where the letter names are. If you want to focus on the letter names, then do what I mentioned in the beginning.
Yeah, that's a great insight for sure, especially the idea of knowing where the scale degrees are in each shape, because that is transferable. So if somebody is completely new to learning the fretboard, where would you have them focus first? The letter names or the scale degrees or both? Or do you have a recommendation on that if somebody's completely new to this fretboard memorization exercise?
Yeah. Okay. If you're talking about a beginning guitar student or someone who's been playing a long time but doesn't know where the notes are?
The second one.
Okay, so if you've been playing a long time, but you're not really sure where the notes are, I would focus on the functions, where the root note is, where the third note is, where the fifth is in all the major keys or the minor keys. That's going to be more valuable. If someone was a beginner, I would recommend the note names, because the things they're going to learn most likely at that level, they're going to be the teachers or books or articles, videos are more likely going to be communicating in letter names, not talking about functions, which we would be or perhaps should be talking about at the more advanced levels.
Right, right. That makes sense. So, if somebody has a very limited time to practice and they've got a whole bunch of other things they want to work on, one of the things I talk about, as I'm sure everybody watching this knows, I specialize mainly in like technique and practicing general topics. I often advise to people to practice away from the guitar as much as possible. And so, when it comes to this fretboard visualization stuff, is there an approach you might recommend for practicing away from the guitar to memorize the fretboard faster?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, that is really how I learned my fretboard. As I learned it pretty much lying in bed, falling asleep. So, and the reason is because, like what Mike just talked about, over the years, I've had limited time. You got a family, you got a couple of kids, as I did or do. And, you got responsibilities, and you only have maybe so much time to practice with the guitar. Well, in the past, I would burn away or use up some of that time trying to learn where things were on the guitar. And it was taking away from actually playing time, real practicing time. And that's when I realized I've got to do this work away from the guitar when I don't have the guitar in the hands. This way, if I've got an hour, I can play the whole hour and not have to, waste 20 minutes of it just trying to figure out where things are. Okay. And do that kind of practice. So what I would do was at night, while falling asleep, lying in bed, falling asleep, I would start to visualize where certain things were on the guitar. Now, when I started that, I didn't know where everything was on the guitar. It wasn't easy for me to figure out where all the notes were or where all the functions were. So I took the easy things, the things that I knew. Okay. So at that point, I knew where all the A notes were because I had previously practiced learning and memorizing where all the A notes were. So I would lie in bed, it's dark, eyes closed, and I would visualize on every string, where are all the A notes? Okay. And that was pretty easy for me to do because, as I said, I'd already learned those. But I wasn't sure about, I wasn't able to immediately recall the other notes. So I started with, okay, let's visualize all the notes above A and below A. So A sharp and A flat, okay, or B flat and G sharp. You could call it that too. So I knew this, but I wanted to be able to recall this and this without needing to think about the A note. So in the beginning, I would think, okay, where's A? Fifth fret on the sixth string. Great. What's the note below it? And I could figure it out that it was A flat or G sharp. But I wanted to skip that step. I wanted to skip the step of thinking about the A note first in order to find the note right below. So, okay, so we've got A. We're going to figure out all the A flats without having to think about the A's. So then I started visualizing all the A flats. Of course, I knew it was only one fret lower than the A's, but I tried not to visualize the A in order to get to or visualize in my mind where the A flat notes were. Then I could do the same thing going higher than A, from A to A sharp or B flat, and I did the same thing. Try to visualize where the B flat notes are without first thinking about the A notes. And once I had that done, I realized, holy cow, I've got 25% of the guitar done. It seemed like a big epiphany, a revelation, that a quarter of the whole guitar now, by just doing this lying in bed at night, I got it done. So then I started on a different note and followed the same process. Now, I can fall asleep really fast. I generally don't have any problem sleeping. So when I'm in bed, ready to fall asleep, close my eyes, between 2 minutes and 5 minutes, I'm gone. I'm out. So that means I'm not laying in bed for an hour thinking about this stuff. But I would, for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, I would visualize these things every night when I went to bed, and I would start to learn these pretty quickly. And then what happened was, because I started doing this every night, when I rolled over from, let's say I was sleeping on my left side, when I roll over to the other side or go on my back or whatever, my brain in that moment of rolling over would start thinking about, just all by itself, start thinking about the notes. So maybe for another 30 seconds or a minute or so, I would be, again, might be 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, still kind of going through this in my mind. In fact, sometimes I even dreamed about it as I was doing it every night before sleeping. And that sped up the process a lot. If you do it consistently, this process goes faster. And then I started learning where the functions of the notes were, as we talked about before, where the roots are, where the thirds are, where the sevenths are. And so eventually I learned the whole thing so I can recall pretty much everything on the guitar, okay, for the things that I'm using. And I didn't have to use any guitar practice time. I didn't need the guitar. I didn't need to spend any, guitar practice time doing this. So it was great because it helped me learn the guitar, the fretboard. And I now just gained an additional 15 or 20 minutes of physical practice time because it wasn't being spent visualizing and trying to learn where the notes or the chords or the scales or the arpeggios were. That's how I learned all this stuff.
There we go. Yeah, great insight there, Tom Hess. For sure, anytime you can make use of the time away from the guitar, especially when you're just laying in bed, not doing anything productive otherwise anyway, that's a great time to be doing this stuff. So I want to go back to when we talked about note function. First, you mentioned actually the individual notes, but then when you started talking about functions, and for anybody who doesn't know, there is also another whole can of worms for memorizing the fretboard, which is scale shapes, or some people wrongly call them modes, which I know you know that they're not that. What are some of your tips for how to go about memorizing scale shapes and have it be more or less streamlined and simple and not so overwhelming?
All right. Well, it's a pretty simple process. It's similar to the process that we talked about with taking, let's say, all the A notes and then figuring out, what's the one below and what's the one above. Same thing for learning the scale fingering. So let's say we've got A major, okay, major scale starting at A. You memorize that one. It's a pretty easy scale to memorize if you're playing them 3 notes per string, because every pair of strings, every 2 strings has the same pattern. Those 2 are the same. Then these 2 are the same as each other. Then the final 2 are the same as each other. So you're really only memorizing 3 things, not 6. Here's one pattern that works for the bottom 2 strings. Here's the second pattern. And then here's the third pattern. It really doesn't take much to memorize this shape, then this shape, then this shape. I mean, it takes, maybe 30 seconds. Okay. If you spend 30 seconds on it a day, you don't even have to play it. You just visualize the shapes. It's really easy. And what I think a lot of people do is they think, okay, I've got to learn my scales. And okay, let's play all the notes. And even if they play it at this speed, it's going to take a long time. And they come back down. Okay, there's very little memorization going on. They're just going through the motions of playing the scale. So all of that took, 10 seconds for me to play up and down at that speed, something like that. How many times would you visualize the shape of the scale if it takes 10 seconds for 1 repetition? Well, how many repetitions would you get done in a minute? 6. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. So if it takes 100 repetitions for you to completely memorize it, now you've got 100 divided by 6. That's a lot of time. But if we just say, okay, there's a shape here, there's a shape here, there's a shape here. How long does it take me to visualize those 3 shapes? How many repetitions could I get done in a minute? A lot. So I've just cut my practice time way down because I'm able to get more, here's a phrase that Mike Philippov uses all the time. results per minute, or I think I'm paraphrasing, results per minute. Correct me, Mike, if I got that wrong. But basically, you're getting more results per minute because you're doing more repetitions per minute. It's really easy. Okay, so that's the first thing to memorize, the first scale shape. Now from there, I would ask, okay, what's the scale shape above that or below that? And let's just take one of those and memorize that. So I'll take the one below. Okay, so now here's our major scale. You have this shape, and this shape. That's the major scale. We'll go right below, and we got this shape, and that shape. How long does it take to put your fingers in these positions and look at it? In fact, you don't even need your guitar. You could just visualize this. That's for the first two strings, or the bottom two strings. Then this for the middle two strings. Then this for the highest two strings. You're memorizing, again, 3 simple little visual patterns. That's it. You don't have to play the whole thing, okay, to learn the scale. Don't waste your time playing it. Just look at it. Just look at the guitar. Okay, I see this. Now I see this. Now I see this. How many times can you see that in a minute? A lot. You could a lot. Okay, so it doesn't take very long to put the two together. Here's the first one. Here's the one below. Okay, now you do that for maybe 5 minutes today. That's it. 5 minutes. You're done. Then go off to do your regular practicing. In fact, probably 5 minutes is probably too long. Maybe 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then go off and do your normal practicing, whatever you're doing. Then come back and visualize those things again for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then you're done. When you go to sleep tonight, same thing. You're going to visualize these two scale patterns. Okay, you're laying in bed, eyes closed. You visualize it for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes till you fall asleep. You wake up the next morning, guess what? You got it. Done. Finished. Now, the next day, don't move on to the next scale pattern. Stay where you are. Okay? Stay where you are. Stay on those two. You might think, well, why would we stay on those two? I already got it. I learned that yesterday. Why don't we move on to the next one? Here's why not to move on. Because if you move on to the next one, there's a good chance 3 days from now, you're going to stumble or forget or not be able to immediately recall the ones you memorized on the first day. Okay, we don't want to go backwards and forget. So at this point, we're going to solidify the memorization, solidify it. So we're going to stay here, okay? We're going to stay here. We might stay here for 3 days and 3 nights, 4 days and 4 nights. We're not in a hurry. We don't need to move on. We're not in a hurry. On night 4, on day 4, add the next one, okay? When I say add it, I mean add it. I don't mean abandon the first two that you did before and only focus on the new one. No, we're going to take the first one. We're going to visualize it. We're going to take the next one. We're going to visualize it. Now we add the next one and we visualize that. So we're going to visualize all 3. Okay. You might do that for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 nights. Then you add the 4th one. And there's only 7. This won't take a couple of weeks. You got it all. The point is, when you do it this way, you're never going to forget it because you've tattooed it into your mind. You're not going to forget it. But if you do it differently, you start playing it up and down, you slow down the repetitions, you move on too quickly to the next one, there's a good chance you might hesitate recalling things when you need to recall them. So that's what I would recommend to learn that stuff for the first time.
Awesome. That's a lot of great insights there. So a question about that. If somebody is practicing the same shape on day 2 and day 3 and to solidify it, but they're finding that kind of boring, what are some ways they can stay on that shape and still do what you just said, but make the process maybe either more fun and or challenging without necessarily just playing faster, but still challenging the brain with that one scale shape they're trying to memorize better?
All right. Well, the first, I've got a multi-part answer here. The first part of the answer is if you're only practicing it for 2 or 3 minutes and you're bored after 2 or 3 minutes, something's wrong. Okay. So, something is wrong if we can't get ourselves for 2 minutes to visualize these patterns. then go off and do other things, practice other stuff, then come back at the end of your session for 2 minutes. That's not a lot. We're not asking a lot here. Then you're falling asleep at night. You're not doing anything anyway. You're literally just waiting to fall asleep. Who cares if it's boring? In fact, the more boring it is, the better the faster you're going to fall asleep. Okay. So it's not like I'm saying, grab your guitar and we're going to sit here for an hour going over the major scale. So just suck it up and like it. Okay. That's not what we're asking anyone to do. That's my first part of my answer. The second part of the answer is, if you wanted to take the guitar now and start using what you have now memorized, great. Get a backing track. Let's say we're in the key of A. Doesn't matter what key. Okay. A, C, G, E, whatever. Get a backing track and just slowly just improvise. You're just going to just literally improvise over the track in key. Just have a little fun. Okay. Don't worry about making it sound great right now. What we're doing is we're just solidifying the shape as we go through it while improvising. So instead of visualizing it up and down or playing it up and down, we're just going through the scale from string to string. So you can have a lot of fun doing that, improvising over a track.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And in fact, there are some like they call them drone tracks, where it's just like either an A major chord or just an A note that just goes over nonstop, and you don't have to worry about playing any wrong notes or being out of key or whatever. As long as you're playing the scale shape, you're going to be fine. So there are also other ways to visualize scales, as I know that you know, like single string scales, or doing them on string pairs, or playing them diagonally. Would you say those are like less important or lower priority to practice as opposed to the shapes, like from the sixth string to the first string? Or should somebody be practicing several of these variations at the same time, or are some more important than others?
Great question. So again, I've got sort of a multi-part answer, and it might sound like these parts are about to contradict each other, but they're really not contradicting each other. I'll explain. So on one hand, we want to practice so that we don't forget it. Okay. Because again, what a lot of people do is they practice something, they kind of got it, and then they go off and do something else, and then they forget it. And then tomorrow or next week or next month or 30 years from now, they still don't have it. They still have to stop and think about, okay, where is that note? Where am I again? They have to stop. I mean, that drives me nuts. It drives me absolutely crazy, because I used to do that. I used to have that problem where I thought, by now I've been playing this stuff for so long, I should know this stuff by now. I should be able to immediately recall it. But for some reason, I keep going over this over and over and over again, because I stop and hesitate while trying to recall the information. And every time I stop and hesitate, it makes it harder to learn something. It makes everything harder to practice. It makes all the techniques harder, because I'm stumbling upon figuring out where things are. Improvising is almost impossible. It's very frustrating. Writing songs it makes everything harder. So on one hand, you want to practice so you don't forget it. You've got immediate recall, and it doesn't slip away. So that requires some degree of reinforcement, a little bit each day, not a lot, but a little bit, until it's tattooed in your mind. And this way you never forgot it. You've got it forever, for life, and you can immediately recall it. Now, at the same time, I don't recommend practicing pretty much anything in a linear way. Okay. So I did say earlier, let's start with the major scale, then go to the one below and add that. Okay. And then master those two, and then go to the one below that and we'll add that. So now there are three. That looks like a very linear process. First, we do step one, major scale. Then we do step two, Locrian fingering. Then we do step three, the Aeolian fingering. That looks very linear. Okay. But I also recommend doing exactly what Mike Philippov just asked about, which is what happens when we want to memorize the scale this way, on one string or on a pair of strings, or on a set of 3 strings, or diagonally across the guitar. So we start down here on a low E string and we end up here on the high E string. Should we wait until we have all of these scale patterns memorized this way before going this way? No. No, do not wait. Do not wait. Remember, when we said, let's take the major scale and then take the one below it. Well, you could stop right there and do, okay, let's just stick with one string now. What am I doing there? All I'm doing is I'm taking string 2 from each little scale shape, string 2. I'm taking the notes from string 2, and I've just made a little simple little melodic pattern out of it. I played the bottom note, the top note, the middle note, and back to the top note. Bottom, top, middle, top. That's the little thing I just played. Now go to the fingering below, the one that starts here. Now do the same thing on this string, string 2. So we can do that all day. When you learn the scale below that, you can make cool little melodic patterns out of it. You do the same thing on string 1. Same thing. You take string 1 from all those. You could take the middle strings, 4 and 5. I'm sorry, 4 and 3. Same little pattern, same sets of 2 or 3 different scale positions here, but now we're going this way on the guitar, right? So we can learn it this way. We can learn it in pairs of strings. How can we do that? Well, because we visualize the scale in its position, it's pretty easy now to just pull out one string or 2 strings and make a simple little pattern out of that string or those pairs of strings or whatever. We still haven't memorized all the other scale fingerings on the guitar yet. We're not waiting to get all 7 positions before we begin playing on one string or on pairs of strings or even diagonally. What did I do? I played strings 6 and 5 from this scale fingering. Then I played the middle 2 strings from the next scale pattern. Then I played the top 2 strings of the next scale pattern. It's actually pretty simple.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff there that can keep you busy for a while, but also a lot of fun and pretty simple to do. We have a question here from Kiko, who's actually one of my students. Hey, Kiko, good to see you. Kiko is asking, it takes a lot longer than 2 minutes for me to practice scales. So I think what Kiko is referring to here is your earlier point about visualizing scales in only a couple of minutes at a time. And I think what Kiko is referring to is actually playing the scale shape and that taking more than 2 minutes because there's the technical aspects to consider and then there's a fretboard visualization aspect to consider as well. So I have some thoughts, but I want to hear your answer as well, Tom Hess.
Sure. Well, playing the scales or practicing the scales themselves and visualizing them are really completely separate things. They're related because it's hard to practice the scale if you don't know what the next notes or are. If you don't know what the shapes are, that will really slow down your ability to play the scales because you're like, what comes next? What's next? I mean, that just is going to destroy your technical practice because you're too busy trying to recall What's the next note on the next string? Okay, so all the physical practice it's kind of, I wouldn't say wasted, but it's done now very inefficiently because your brain is tied up just trying to recall where things are. Now, if you said, okay, I'm going to take 2 minutes, I'm going to visualize the scale pattern here for the major scale, and I'm going to do that for 2 minutes, and now that's over. Now I'm going to start practicing my scales. Great. Let's do that. You don't have to necessarily play them, all the strings, all the notes at once. You could say, let's just take the bottom two. Okay. You just take those 2 strings. Get comfortable with that. Work on the technical aspect of it. You can do that same thing for the next 2 strings. I mean, it doesn't take 2 minutes to do this. You can do it pretty quickly. Okay. Now, it may take a while to do all the scale positions everywhere on the guitar in multiple keys. Yes. But we're not talking about practice. When I said 2 minutes for visualizing the scales, that's about visualization. That wasn't about practicing the technical aspect of playing the scales. You could take all the time you want. You could take a half an hour if you want to work on physically playing the scales, getting the fingering right, getting the shifting smooth, getting the picking right with directional picking or whatever other picking system you want to use. Okay. Working on the efficiency of both hands, working on the 2-hand synchronization, paying attention to the economy of motion in the pick, avoiding the flying fingers, getting the articulation to sound strong, getting the phrasing and the timing. All of that stuff may take well more than 2 minutes, and that's okay. But the visualization process shouldn't take very long. A couple of minutes in the beginning of the session, a couple of minutes at the end of the session. You do it at night when you're falling asleep. You'll have this stuff memorized pretty quickly if you do that every day.
Yep, that's pretty much hit the nail on the head there. So awesome. I like to actually switch gears and go into a little bit more advanced territory, but I think you'll enjoy this question, Tom Hess. So as you know, there is the scale degrees inside each scale shapes that are like the function of the note in the scale. But then when you are improvising, let's say in the key of A major, each of those notes functions differently over the chords as they change. So I'm sure you've heard this question. Should I memorize the note functions of the scale first, or how they function over chords as the chords change? Or if you do both, how do you wrap your brain around which one you think about first, or which one you think about when?
Okay. Well, should you focus on memorizing the functions of the notes within a scale position over all the possible chords that exist in that key? Should you do that? Is that a goal? Yes, absolutely. Should you start with that? Well, kind of. Remember that the notes of the scale, in terms of how they function, which note is the root, which note's the second, which one's the third, that is exactly the same for the scale or the key as it is for the one chord of the key. So, for example, if we're in the key of A major, the root of the A major scale or the A major key is also the root of the one chord, the first chord of the key, which is A major, right? So when you learn the functions of the notes in the key, you are simultaneously memorizing where they are for the one chord because they're the same. So, for example, note 2 of the scale is also the second, or you could call it the ninth, of the A major chord. Okay, it's exactly the same. So you would start with memorizing the functions of the scale first, because when you do that, you've already memorized it for the one chord. Now you've only got 6 more chords to go in the key. There are 7 diatonic chords in the key, chord functions in the key. So you've already done 1/7 of them. Now you just choose a different chord. You might choose the 5 chord or the 4 chord. It doesn't really matter which one you choose because eventually we want to do them all. All right. So maybe you would choose the 5 chord because the 5 chord is very, 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 very common in songs. Okay, so now you've already got the 1 chord memorized if you've memorized the key. So this is done. Now you can choose the 5 chord and you go through the same notes, okay? And you just learn, okay, where are the roots of the 5 chord? Where's the 3rd? Where's the 5th? Where's the 7th? Where's the 9th? Where's the 11th? Where's the 6th? Okay? It's not hard to figure out. You just take 1 chord at a time, 1 scale position at a time, and you visualize them. If it helps you to write them out, write them out. Now, what I don't suggest is to try to learn all of them at once. So don't try to learn the root, the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th over a chord all at the same time. That's way too much information. 1 note over 1 chord. Remember, what is our strategy? Our objective. Our objective is to memorize things and never forget them, ever. So 99 years from now, you'll still remember where the 4th of a 5 chord is in a major key because you've drilled it and tattooed it to your brain. You won't have to stop and figure it out. Okay, give me a second here. Let me figure out where. No, none of that. We want to finish this so we don't have to waste time in the future relearning it, recalculating it, guessing, figuring it out. We don't want to have to do that. Okay, so make it easy for yourself. 1 chord, 1 note from the key, put them together, memorize it in 1 scale position, maybe the major scale. After that, you can either move on to a different note over that chord, or you could keep the note and the chord the same, but move to another scale position and memorize it there. Either approach is fine. You're going to do it all eventually. I mean, you can do whatever you want, okay? But if you really want to master this stuff, you'll end up doing it all anyway. The order there is not as important. Just remember, we only want to have to, okay, let me back up. Guys, pay attention to this part. Everybody wants to have this stuff memorized, right? And what's frustrating, it's not frustrating because it's boring. It's frustrating because we forget, okay? There's nothing frustrating about visualizing something, learning it, memorizing it, and be able to recall it instantly for the rest of your life. That is not boring. That's fun. The boring part, the frustrating part is when we try and do it today, and 11 days from now, we don't remember what the heck we did yesterday. That's frustrating. And now we got to do it again. And we can't recall it. And we're hesitating. That is not fun. And that's what we're trying to avoid. We want to make this fun, not boring, not frustrating. We don't want to pull our hair out. Okay. We want to make this easy for ourselves. That's how I recommend to do it. Make it easy, but make it easy for you. And this is how I recommend to do that.
Yes, for sure. So that's a very, very good insight there. Now, what are some ways you would practice integrating your knowledge of the fretboard with your other skills? I know integration is a big topic you talk about, and we've talked about one aspect of doing that, let's say, over a single chord, where there's not too much stuff to think about. But do you have any maybe others integration exercises where somebody can take the things after they've practiced the things you've been talking about? How might they go about integrating it with some, let's say, technical skill or some other piece of musical knowledge? Just maybe give 1 or 2 examples.
Sure. Well, part of the reason why we want to learn and remember and be able to recall where things are on the guitar is so that we can use those things. So let's imagine I've got a magic wand. Here's my letter opener. Let's pretend this is a magic wand. And I can wave around this magic wand and give you immediately the skills and the memory to recall where things are on the guitar. Okay, that's good. Now you don't have to waste time recalling it. That will help you a lot. But that still doesn't help you use it yet. It only helps you recall where things are. It doesn't tell you how they're going to feel in advance before you play them. That's really the holy grail, okay? The holy grail of all this stuff is that when you look at the guitar, you know where the different emotional parts are the specific emotions over specific chords within specific keys, so that when you're writing a song, you can immediately recreate that feeling. When you're improvising and you want to express something, you want to express hopelessness and loneliness, you know immediately where to find it and where that is on the guitar. You don't want to sit here and go through trial and error and get the problem with trial and error is all the error. Okay. And all the time that it wastes. You want to know, and I'll just tell you that the loneliest note you can play over a chord would be the ninth over a minor chord. If you isolate a minor chord, play the ninth on top, you have a very lonely sound, very dark. Okay. Very, there's not much hope there in that sound. Okay. So for example, that note, that's the ninth. Very lonely sound. So if you know that, I mean, I know that. And when you know, now you don't, now you know it too. If you know that, and if you know where the ninth is, you can go right to it. There's no guessing. There's no trying to figure it out. There's no trial and error. You go immediately to it. Immediately. Anytime you want to write a song, anytime you're jamming with your friends, anytime you're playing over a backing track, anytime you're improvising, anytime you're on an audition or a gig or just want to have fun. It's way more fun if you know the emotion you want to create and you know exactly where it is and you just go create it. Just like if you want to express yourself, let's say you're talking to your wife or your friend or whoever, and you have some important thoughts or feelings that you want to communicate to the other person. You don't want to sit there with a dictionary or a thesaurus and choose your words and hold on, I'm finding the right word here to express this feeling I've got. Okay. That's not what you want to do. You want to just know the word, know the phrase, know how to say it, know how to articulate the words. You just do it, right? When you talk, this is what you do all the time. That's what you want this to be for you. Okay. So memorizing the stuff is part of it. Then knowing where these different feelings are is really important. So let's kind of tie this together. So Mike asked, how might you integrate the skills together? Okay. First, you would need to know where the ninth note is over the minor chord. So for an A minor, where's the ninth? Well, there's one here. My guitar is a little bit out of tune, but that's a very hopeless, lonely note right there. There's another one here. Because you want to know where those are. Okay. Then you want to learn what notes over what chords, at least when isolated, produce which emotions. That's a different skill set. That's about music theory, a little bit about ear training, but it's mostly music theory. Okay. Now you have all this math power that can't be used until you know where it is. If you know where it is, but you don't know this stuff, you still can't put it together. So you want to know where these things are, and you can learn these. These are not, this is not, that hard. It takes some time, but it's not hard. Okay. Guys, we're not launching people to the moon, trying to keep them alive and bring them back safely. We're not SpaceX or NASA. We're just playing guitar. Okay. It's not that hard, but it takes a little bit of time and practice in a way that you don't forget and you don't have to start over. So that means you learn and memorize a little bit of piece of information, then you add a little bit to it. Okay. That's an example of putting it together.
Awesome. And that also, I think, answers Warren's question, especially the last part of what you said, Tom Hess. Warren asks, do you audiate the sounds when you visualize? I forget the sound of pitches when away from the instrument. So I think that is something you definitely want to build up to. Maybe not right away if you're new to learning the fretboard, start with the earlier things that Tom Hess talked about earlier in the hour. But as you become more advanced and you have to think less and less about where the notes are. Then, especially if you've been working on your ear training, in the meantime, you can start tying it together like Tom Hess was just describing, to when you think of the ninth, you hear that lonely sound that you just heard when Tom Hess was playing the examples. The same for the other notes.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. So there's the knowledge part, the visualization part of the guitar. Then there's the music theory knowledge of what things create what feelings. And then there's the being able to hear those things in your mind, which that's more of a ear training oral skills thing. But one thing that will help with that question, I don't mean to get off track here, but one thing that will help, Warren, is singing while you play and before you play. That's a whole separate exercise. I wouldn't try to combine that right now with learning where things are. Later in the future, you might integrate them together. But let's say you've got a backing track and you've got a chord, okay? Let's say that we're going to play over that, okay? Instead of going to your guitar and just saying, okay, this appears to be an A minor, and it is. I've got my A minor scale. I guess I can just like play a bunch of notes and see what sounds good. That's how a lot of people approach improvising, but that's just trial and error. And again, the problem with that is all the error. Okay, it would be better, in my opinion, if you were in my improvising class. What I would do is I would say, okay, Warren, here's what we're going to do, buddy. Here's the track. Now, you sing any note that you want. You don't have to know what the note is. I just want you to hum something. Just sing anything. You don't have to sing it loud. I don't have to hear it, but you have to hear it. Any note that you try to sing is going to sound good 100% of the time. Now, let me clarify. I'm not saying that you're a great singer. I don't know if you're a great singer or not. I'm not even sure who I'm talking to. Just somebody named Warren, okay? But your voice may or may not be very good. Your voice may or may not be very accurate. Your voice may not be able to produce a clear note in tune. That's not important. What's important is the note that you imagine, because over a track, unless you did it on purpose, nobody is going to imagine a bad sounding note. You would have to force yourself to do that. So if we're jamming, you and I are jamming, I'm playing chords for you, and you just tried to sing anything, whatever the note is that you attempted to sing, that attempted note is going to sound good 100% of the time. You can't screw it up. You can't. You could screw up a note playing. You could screw it up if your voice can't match what you're imagining, but you're not going to imagine a bad sounding note. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure. That is a great insight there. Okay, last question I have for you, Tom Hess. The cage system, your favorite topic of all time.
Oh, I love it.
What are some ways that somebody who is trying to learn the cage system, how is that going to potentially hurt their ability to memorize the fretboard, or at least do it in a quick and effective way?
How much time do we have? We can sit here for a long time talking about the cage system. Okay, here's my thoughts on this. If someone already knows the cage system and knows it really, 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 really well, do you have to start over with some other system? No, you don't have to start over. It may not be worth all the effort involved at that point. But if you don't know the cage system, I would avoid it like the plague for many reasons. If you are familiar with it, but you don't have it, you haven't mastered it, you kind of are familiar with it, I would recommend switching immediately to 3 notes per string for so many different reasons. Okay. The cage system is based upon these arbitrary chords. Okay. So you've got like the G shape and the E shape and these other ones. Okay. Why would you? We could be here literally all day talking about this. Those chord shapes, although yes, you could use them to kind of remember where the notes are, why would you want to associate chord shapes with that particular scale when what we're ultimately trying to do is learn where all the functions are. This is as you get more advanced, all the functions are for all the chords. Why would you associate it with a particular arbitrary chord? There's very, very little value there, in my opinion. Obviously, a lot of people disagree with that opinion, and that's fine. Whatever. You want to do the cage thing? Go do your thing. Okay. If you want to know why I don't recommend it, I have an article. It's the most popular article I've ever written about why I think the cage system is a really bad system. It's on my website, tomhess.net. Anyway, I think the 3 note per string system is better not only for visualization, but also for many, many other things that we just really wouldn't get into time. We wouldn't have the time to get into all that now in here.
Yeah. In fact, Tom Hess, I know you have a resource to share with the viewers here, which actually is a good introduction to the 3 note per string system versus the cage system. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Everybody can grab it here. You can explain what it is.
Yeah. So this is my Fretboard Freedom Blueprint. This is a free download. Doesn't cost anything. You guys can download this for free right now at the link you see. And what this is intended to do is to help you visualize the scale patterns all laid out 3 notes per string. Visualize the scale patterns in every major and minor and modal key. So it'll make the process easier for you instead of just looking at 7 scale shapes and wondering, what am I supposed to do with that?
Yes, so everybody can download that at this link here. Again, as Tom has said, it's totally free. You guys should all go and check it out. And I also have something for you. Those of you who have not seen this yet, my Guitar Speed Formula Masterclass, which actually kind of goes nicely hand in hand with the 3 note per string scale shapes you're going to learn from Tom Hess's guide, because I'm going to show you how to build speed with them without having to start slow and do the whole gradually increase the metronome a few BPM at a time. Because if you've already tried that, you've probably run into some roadblocks doing that. Well, this masterclass is going to show you a different way to practice, and that it doesn't take a lot of time, but give you some really, really good results. So it's totally free. Check it out at the link and enjoy. All right. So Tom Hess, thank you very much for coming on today, sharing a lot of great stuff about fretboard visualization. I know it's a topic that many people are frustrated by. So watch this recording. It's going to be, when it shows up on the channel multiple times, so that it becomes something you get past on your road to guitar mastery. You can focus on bigger and better things. Thanks a lot, Tom Hess.
Thank you,
everybody, for hanging out with us today. Take care. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.